Millionaire rushing through the airport freezes when he sees his black ex-wife with twins. Cassian Reynolds stood in front of the mirror inside his private jet's bathroom. He was fixing his fancy silk tie. At 45 years old, Cassian was one of the richest and most powerful real estate developers in New York. Many tall buildings in the city had his name on them. His black hair was neat, and his expensive suit fit him perfectly. He looked strong and confident, but deep inside, something was missing. Not even all his money could fill the emptiness he felt. "Sir, we will be landing at JFK in 20 minutes," his assistant called from outside the door. Cassian splashed cold water on his face. He needed to stay focused. Today was a big day. He was about to close the most important business deal of his career, a $5 billion project that would change downtown Manhattan. He couldn't let his mind wander. Not today. But as he walked back to his seat, his thoughts drifted, just like they always did when he wasn't careful. He thought about Elowen, his ex-wife, the woman who left him 5 years ago with only a short note saying she needed to find herself. Elowen Taylor was not like the other people in Cassian's world. She was an artist and a teacher. She taught art to kids in poor neighborhoods. She had the brightest smile and the biggest heart. 7 years ago, Cassian met her at a fancy charity event. Unlike everyone else, she wasn't impressed by his money or fame. Instead, she challenged him. She asked why there weren't more art programs for kids in poor schools. Cassian fell in love fast. Their love story was all over the newspapers. A rich businessman dating a black teacher from Brooklyn, it was all anyone could talk about. But Cassian didn't care. For the first time in his life, someone saw him for who he really was, not just his money. They got married after 6 months, even though Cassian's mother didn't approve. The first 2 years were perfect, but then things changed. Elowen struggled with the pressure of being in the spotlight. People treated her differently. Some were unkind. Some looked down on her. The constant whispers and judgments started to wear her down. The plane landed smoothly, snapping Cassian out of his memories. His phone buzzed with messages from his team. The big deal was in trouble. His rival, Leander Vaughn, was trying to steal it. "The board meeting starts in an hour, sir," his assistant Sarah reminded him as they walked through the private terminal. "Mr. Vaughn has made a new offer." Cassian barely heard her. His eyes were locked on someone, on the other side of the glass wall. He saw a woman he would recognize anywhere. Elowen. His heart stopped. She was even more beautiful than he remembered. Her long braids were now in elegant twists. She wore a simple dress that made her look graceful. But that wasn't what shook him the most. Standing beside her, holding her hands, were 2 little boys. They looked about 4 years old. They had warm, caramel-colored skin and bright green eyes exactly like his own. Cassian's knees felt weak. He couldn't breathe. Elowen had been pregnant when she left. She had his children, his sons, and she never told him. "Cancel the meeting," Cassian said. "But sir, the deal," Sarah started. "Cancel everything." His voice was strong. Nothing else mattered now. He started walking toward the main terminal, his heart pounding. Elowen turned, saw him, and froze. Fear flashed in her eyes. She grabbed the boy's hands and tried to walk away quickly. "Elowen," Cassian called out. She stopped and turned around slowly. Their eyes met, and for a moment, time stood still. The twins looked up at Cassian, their green eyes full of curiosity. "Hello, Cassian," Elowen said softly. Her voice still made his heart ache. "Were you ever going to tell me?" His voice was rough with emotion. His eyes never left the boys. Tears filled Elowen's eyes. I wanted to. So many times." One of the boys tugged at her dress. "Mommy, who's that man?" Cassian's heart broke at being called that man by his own sons. "We need to talk," he said firmly. Elowen looked around as if searching for an escape, but she knew this moment had been coming for 5 years. Finally, she sighed. "Boys, how about some ice cream?" The twins cheered, excited. Cassian felt another wave of pain. He had missed every laugh, every smile, every special moment. As they walked to an airport cafe, Cassian couldn't stop staring at the boys. They looked just like him. "What are their names?" he asked, quietly. Elowen swallowed. "Lucian and Cassian Jr., but everyone calls them Ronan and Soren." Cassian Jr., his son, was named after him, and he hadn't known for 4 years. The pain was unbearable. The boys ran to the ice cream counter. Cassian took a deep breath, trying to understand everything. "Why?" he asked Elowen. "Why didn't you tell me?" She clutched her purse. "I was scared, Cassian. Your world was too much for me, and when I found out I was having twins, I panicked." "So you disappeared, kept my sons from me?" His voice cracked. "Do they even know about me?" "They know their daddy is a businessman," Elowen whispered. "They ask about you sometimes. I have pictures. I never wanted them to feel unloved." Before Cassian could reply, the boys ran back, holding their ice cream excitedly. "Mommy, they have chocolate chip cookie dough," Soren said. "And mint chocolate chip," Ronan added. Cassian felt something shift inside him. The business deal didn't matter. If only this moment did. "Can I have ice cream with you?" he asked. The twins looked at their mother. Elowen hesitated, then nodded. As they ate, Cassian listened to the boys talk about their school, friends, and dreams. "I love planes," Ronan said. "I'm going to be a pilot." "No way," Soren argued. "We're going to build skyscrapers." Cassian's throat tightened. His son wanted to follow in his footsteps without even knowing who he was. Elowen watched them carefully. Tears shone in her eyes. She saw the love in Cassian's face. He had missed so much, but he wouldn't miss another moment. When the ice cream was gone, Cassian turned to Elowen. "I want to be their father. Really be their father." She nodded. "I see now. I was wrong to keep them from you." The news spread fast. "Real estate tycoon discovers secret twin sons at JFK." The headlines screamed. Cassian's mother, Eleanor, stormed into his office, holding a newspaper. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I just found out myself," Cassian said. "We need DNA tests," Eleanor insisted. "They're mine," Cassian said firmly. "One look, and there's no doubt." His assistant rushed in. "Sir, Mr. Vaughn is threatening to go public with accusations against you." Cassian sighed. The $5 billion deal, he had forgotten, and for the first time, business wasn't his priority. "Tell him I'll call later," Cassian said, grabbing his coat. "Where are you going?" Eleanor asked. Cassian smiled. "I'm going to fix the biggest mistake of my life." Cassian drove his red sports car through the busy streets of Brooklyn. He had an address from Elowen, and now he was here, outside a cute brown brick house. Flowers were growing in the windows, and there was a pretty hand-painted sign on the door. It was very different from his big, fancy home in Manhattan, but he could see Elowen's love in every little detail. Before he could knock, the door opened. Elowen stood there in jeans and a simple shirt. She looked tired. "The boys are at school," she said in a soft voice. "I know we need to talk." She led Cassian inside. The living room was warm and cozy. There were drawings on the walls and family pictures everywhere. Cassian's heart hurt when he saw pictures of his sons. Their first steps, birthday parties, their first day of preschool. He had missed it all. "They are happy," Elowen said, watching him look at the photos. "They are loved. They have a good life." "A life without their father," Cassian whispered, turning to her. "I want to be part of their lives, Elowen. I want to know them, love them, support them. I want to be their dad." Elowen's eyes filled with tears. "It's not that simple. Your world, your life, it's what I wanted to protect them from. The cameras, the attention, the pressure. I'm not the same man I was 5 years ago," Cassian said. "Losing you changed me. And now, knowing about the boys, nothing else matters." Before Elowen could answer, sir, there was a knock at the door. An older lady with kind eyes smiled at them. "Oh, I didn't know you had company," she said. "I just brought some cookies for the boys." "Thank you, Mrs. Winslow," Elowen said. She turned to Cassian. "She's our neighbor. She helps with the boys." Mrs. Winslow's eyes widened as she looked at Cassian. Oh my, you're their father, aren't you? I saw it on the news this morning. Those boys have your eyes. Cassian smiled at her. Thank you for taking care of them when I couldn't. After she left, Elowen sighed and sat on the couch. See, it's already starting. People are talking. The attention. The gossip. We can handle it together, Cassian said, sitting beside her. Tell me, Elowen, what really made you leave? Elowen was quiet for a long time. I found out I was pregnant the day of your mother's big party. I was going to tell you that night, but then I overheard her talking. She said she was glad I hadn't had a baby yet because the family wasn't ready for. Elowen's voice broke. She didn't want mixed-race grandchildren. Cassian felt like he had been punched. Why didn't you tell me? You were under so much pressure. You were working so hard, and I saw how torn you were between your world and mine. And when I heard your mother that night, I just couldn't do it. I couldn't let our children face that kind of hurt from their own grandmother. Cassian reached for her hand. No job, no company is worth missing my children's lives. I want to fix this, Elowen. Not just with the boys, but with you too. Before she could answer, loud voices came from outside. The front door burst open and two little boys ran inside. Mommy, we learned about dinosaurs today, Ronan said excitedly. And I drew a T-Rex, Soren added. Then they noticed Cassian. They stared at him, confused. Hey, you're the man from the airport, Soren said. The one who had ice cream with us. Cassian's heart raced. He looked at Elowen, and she nodded. Boys, she said gently, there's something very important I need to tell you about our friend Cassian. The twins climbed onto the couch between them, their big green eyes, Cassian's eyes, watching her. Remember how you always ask about your daddy? About where he is and what he does? She asked. The boys nodded. Well, Cassian is your daddy. There was silence. Then Ronan tilted his head. Is that why we have the same eyes? Cassian swallowed the lump in his throat. Yes, buddy, that's exactly why. Soren looked confused. But where were you before? Why didn't you live with us? Cassian's heart broke. I didn't know about you, he said. But now that I do, I want to be the best daddy ever, if you'll let me. The twins looked at each other for a moment, like they were having a secret twin talk. Then, to Cassian's surprise, Soren climbed onto his lap. Can you teach me how to build tall buildings? He asked. Cassian hugged him tight. I'll teach you everything I know, buddy. Ronan squeezed in next to them. Will you come to my school play? I'm going to be a tiger. I wouldn't miss it for anything in the world, Cassian promised. At the play, Cassian sat in the front row, watching Ronan roar in his tiger costume. Soren waved from his seat and Elowen smiled beside them. But in the back of the room, Cassian's mother Isolde watched with a stiff, unhappy face. After the play, she pulled Cassian aside. Darling, we need to talk, she whispered. The company is worried. You've missed important meetings for school plays. People are talking. Just then, Ronan ran up, still wearing his tiger makeup. Daddy, did you see me? Was I a scary tiger? Cassian knelt beside him, fixing his crooked whiskers. You were the scariest tiger ever. Even real tigers would be afraid of you. Ronan grinned, then noticed Isolde. Hello, grandmother, he said politely. Isolde barely looked at him. Cassian, this is serious. Your company needs you. The zoo can wait. No, it can't, Cassian said. I promised my sons, and I'm not breaking that promise. The next morning, Elowen looked worried. Have you seen the news? She asked, holding up her tablet. The headline made Cassian's stomach turn. Rich businessman's twins need DNA test. Shareholders don't believe they are his sons. Your mother did this, Elowen whispered. Cassian clenched his fists. I'll handle it, but right now, we have a zoo to visit. At the zoo, the boys had the best day ever. But soon, Cassian got a call, an emergency board meeting. He had to leave early, breaking his sons' hearts. In the boardroom, his enemy, Mr. Vaughn, smirked. Cassian, your family drama is hurting the company. Step down. Cassian stood tall. My sons are my family. No test is needed. But if you want proof, I'll give it. And let me tell you something. Our biggest investors, They respect family, and they don't want a man who abandons his children. Kids shouldn't be in charge of important things like money. That's what people were saying about Vaughn. And it reminded everyone of how messy his own life was. He had a big fight with his wife, got divorced, and his daughter didn't talk to him anymore. Back in Brooklyn that night, Cassian came home and found Elowen sitting on the front steps of her house. She looked worried. "The boys are inside with Mrs. Winslow," she said. "They keep asking why you left." Cassian sat beside her. "I had to keep us safe. Vaughn was trying to take control of the company by using you and the boys." "Maybe my mom is right," Elowen said softly. "Maybe this is too much for us. The boys were happy before." "But I wasn't," Cassian said quickly. "And they weren't really happy either. They needed their dad, and I needed them. We can make this work, Elowen. We just need time." Inside the house, they heard Ronan and Soren arguing over which stuffed animal was better, Soren's penguin or Ronan's tiger. The sound of them arguing over something so small felt special to Cassian. "I've missed so much," he said quietly. "I won't miss anything else ever again." Elowen looked at him for a long time. "The Cassian I knew 5 years ago would have picked the company over us. The Cassian you knew didn't know what it felt like to hold his sons, to hear them call him Daddy," Cassian said. "Some things are more important than money." Just then the front door opened, and two small boys ran outside, jumping into Cassian's arms. "Daddy, Mrs. Winslow made cookies, and we saved you some." Cassian looked at their happy faces and knew he had made the right choice. Tomorrow he would deal with Vaughn, the board, and all the problems waiting for him. But tonight he had cookies to eat with his sons. For 3 days, Cassian didn't open the DNA test results sitting on his desk. He didn't need a paper to tell him what his heart already knew. But the board of directors at work made him take the test, so he finally opened the envelope. His hands shook a little. Sarah, his assistant, knocked on the door and came in. She looked worried. "Sir, your mother is here." And she brought her lawyer. Before Cassian could say anything, Elena, his mother, walked in, followed by a serious-looking man in a fancy suit. "The results," Elena said. "Let me see them." Cassian held up the paper. 99.9% positive. "Happy now, mother? Can we stop pretending my sons aren't your grandsons?" Elena sat down and smoothed her expensive dress. "Now we can talk about custody." Cassian blinked. "Custody? What are you talking about?" The lawyer stepped forward. "Mrs. Reynolds believes the boys should be raised with her in a better environment. She has the money and power to give them a better life." "Get out," Cassian said in a low, angry voice. "Both of you, right now." "Cassian, be reasonable," Elena said. "Those boys are Reynolds' heirs. They deserve the best life." "Oh, like the best life that made Elowen run away? You didn't even believe they were mine before they were born, and now you want to take them away? It's not happening, ever." After they left, Cassian rushed to Elowen's house to warn her, but when he got there, he found her sitting on the front steps, crying. "Elowen, what's wrong? Where are the boys?" "They're inside with Mrs. Winslow," she sniffled. "The school called. A reporter tried to sneak into their classroom to take pictures. The principal says it's becoming a problem." Cassian sat beside her, feeling guilty. "I'm so sorry. I'll hire security." "That's not the answer," Elowen said, standing up and pacing. "I don't want guards around our kids. I don't want reporters spying on them. I got another job offer," she added. "An art school in California wants me to teach kids." Cassian's heart sank. "You're not taking them away again. Not again." "I'm trying to protect them," she said. "Your mother's lawyers are calling. The reporters won't leave us alone. This isn't fair to them." "And growing up without their father is fair?" Cassian's voice cracked. "Elowen, please. I'll step down as CEO if I have to." She looked at him in shock. "You'd give up your company for them?" In a heartbeat. He took her hands. The boys need us both. Together, we're stronger. Just then, they heard a loud crash inside, followed by crying. They ran inside and found Soren on the floor holding his arm. We were playing superheroes, Ronan said tearfully. Soren tried to fly from the couch. Eloin checked Soren's arm, which was already swelling. We need to go to the hospital. At the hospital, reporters were already outside. Cassian had to call security to keep them away. Watching his son get an X-ray, Cassian made a decision. He picked up his phone. Sarah, call an emergency board meeting and get Mr. Finch on the phone. Yes, I know what time it is in Beijing. This can't wait. Eloin looked at him, confused. What are you doing? I'm moving the company to California, Cassian said. New York will still run, but I won't have to be there every day. She stared at him. Are you saying, if you take that job in California, we're coming with you? All of us. Soren perked up. We're moving to California like where Disneyland is. The doctor chuckled as she wrapped Soren's arm in a blue cast. Just a sprain. He'll be okay in a few weeks. Ronan, who had been sitting next to his twin the whole time, asked, Can I sign his cast first? That night, after the boys were asleep, Cassian and Eloin sat in the kitchen drinking tea. Are you sure about this? She asked. Leaving everything behind? I've never been more sure of anything, Cassian said. But are you? You won't run again? Eloin was quiet for a moment. 5 years ago, I was scared. I thought I was protecting our kids, but I was just running. I won't make that mistake again. Cassian took her hand. Then we'll face everything together. The next morning, Cassian walked into the board meeting with confidence. Leander Vaughn was there, looking smug. Gentlemen, Cassian said, I have an announcement. I'm moving the company's operations to California. The room erupted in noise. Vaughn jumped up. This is what I warned you about. He's leaving. No, Leander, Cassian said calmly. I'm growing the company, and I'm putting my family first. Elena sat in silence, shocked. If you take my grandsons away, they were always your grandsons, Mother. You just didn't see it. Moving day arrived quickly. The house was full of boxes. The twins were excited about flying on their daddy's private plane. Mrs. Winslow wiped away tears. Who will help me water my flowers now? The twins hugged her. Don't cry, Soren said. We'll talk to you every day. Cassian stood in the doorway, watching everything with a full heart. In just a few weeks, these two boys had changed his life completely, and now they were about to change it again. His phone buzzed. It was another message from Leander Vaughn. Ever since Cassian announced he was moving, Vaughn had been trying to stop him. His newest trick was saying Cassian couldn't take the twins to another state without special permission from a judge. The movers are here, Eloin called from the front door. Boys, go get your backpacks. The twins ran upstairs loudly. Eloin saw Cassian's worried face and asked, What's wrong? Vaughn's lawyers are trying to stop us from leaving, Cassian said. They say we need court approval because we never made our custody official. Eloin's face fell. Can they really do that? They can try, Cassian said, pulling her close. But I have our own lawyers working on it. Nothing will stop us from giving our boys the fresh start they deserve. Suddenly, they heard noise outside. A black car stopped, and out stepped an older woman looking messy and worried. Mother, Cassian said, stepping onto the porch. What are you doing here? Isolde clutched her fancy handbag like a shield. You can't just take them away, she said. They're my only grandchildren. Before Cassian could answer, the twins ran down the stairs. Grandmother, they called, but then they stopped, remembering that she was usually not very warm. To everyone's surprise, Isolde bent down on the ground, not caring about her expensive silk suit. Lucien, Cassian Jr., she said softly. I've been a foolish old woman. The boys looked at each other, confused. They had never seen her like this before. I was too worried about what people would think, Isolde said, her voice shaky. I forgot what really matters. You are perfect just as you are. You are smart, kind, and wonderful, and I have been terrible to you and your mother. Elowen stepped forward, putting her hands protectively on the boy's shoulders. Isolde looked up at her with tears in her eyes. Elowen, I know I hurt you. My unfair beliefs pushed you away. I made you feel like you had to hide my own grandchildren from me. I don't deserve forgiveness, but please don't cut me out of their lives. Ronan, always the softer twin, patted her shoulder. Don't cry, grandmother. We can use Daddy's computer to talk to you, just like Mrs. Bragg Winslow does with her family. Isolde pulled both boys into a hug, not caring that Soren's cast wrinkled her blouse or that Ronan's shoes got her skirt dirty. Cassian watched in shock. His mother had never shown this much emotion in public before. I have an idea, Isolde said, standing up. The Reynolds summer house in Malibu has been empty for years. Let me give it to you. The boys should have a beach house for their new life in California. Elowen started to protest, but Isolde held up her hand. Please, let me try to be the grandmother they deserve. Let me be part of their new beginning. Before anyone could answer, a black car pulled up. Leander Vaughn stepped out, waving papers in the air. I have a court order, he said with a smug smile. No one is taking these children anywhere until a judge looks at this case. Isolde turned, her tears gone and replaced with anger. Leander Vaughn, you snake! Vaughn looked surprised. Mrs. Reynolds, I thought you would want to protect your grandchildren. Isolde's voice was cold. Their best interest is being with their loving parents, not being used in your games. She turned to Cassian. Call the pilot. Tell him to get ready for one more passenger. I'm coming to California with you until this is settled, and I will use every friend I have to make sure Vaughn loses. Vaughn's smug look vanished. Isolde pulled out her phone. Hello, Judge Matthews? Isolde Reynolds here. Your wife and I were just talking at the club. Yes, about that court order. Within an hour, the court order was put on hold. The family was free to leave. The whole neighborhood came to say goodbye. Mrs. Winslow handed out cookies to everyone, even the reporters. On the private jet, the twins were so excited they ran up and down the aisle until Elowen finally got them to sit with their tablets. Look, Daddy! Soren pointed out the window. Everything looks so small, like my old dollhouse. Isolde smiled and joined in. That's right, just like a dollhouse. She sat on the floor, helping the boys build Lego castle. Elowen watched her, surprised. She had taken off her fancy jacket and was actually laughing. Cassian smiled. Sometimes, he whispered, people can change. Sometimes, Elowen agreed. They just need a reason to. Our boys seem to be that reason. Cassian looked at his family, his whole family. 5 years ago, he thought he had lost everything. Now, he had everything that truly mattered. The pilot spoke over the intercom. Welcome aboard. Next stop, Los Angeles. The weather is sunny skies ahead. Cassian smiled. Sunny skies, indeed. Soren tugged his sleeve. Daddy, when we get to California, can we get a dog? A big one. Ronan added, to protect our beach house. Isolde looked up from the iPad. I know a great dog breeder in Beverly Hills. Elowen and Cassian looked at each other and laughed. Their new life was starting already. When they arrived, the Malibu beach house took everyone's breath away. The whole place had big windows showing the ocean. The sound of waves filled every room. The twins ran around excitedly. Look, Mommy, we can see dolphins. Ronan pressed his face against the glass. And there's a pool. Soren shouted, already running outside. Isolde smiled. I had the house fixed up last week. The boys' rooms are upstairs. I even painted them in their favorite colors. Elowen raised an eyebrow. How did you know their favorite colors? Mrs. Winslow may have helped, Isolde admitted. We've been texting. Cassian laughed, but then his phone rang. It was from his office. "Sir, Leander Vaughn is here. He's telling the investors that you're too unstable to run the company." Before Cassian could answer, he heard a loud splash outside. He rushed out and found Soren in the pool, fully dressed. Elowin pulled him out, scolding, "You didn't even put your swimsuit on." "But Mommy, I wanted to see if I could swim with my cast." Isolde appeared with towels. "Good thing I hired a swimming teacher. She starts tomorrow." Later that night, Cassian and Elowin walked on the beach, watching the sunset. "Having second thoughts?" he asked. "No, yes, maybe," she sighed. "It's all happening so fast." Isolde called from the deck, "You might want to see this." On TV, Leander Vaughn was giving a speech, trying to ruin Cassian's career. Isolde smirked. "Allow me." She made a call, and soon a famous investor supported Cassian instead. The next morning, the twins had their first swim lesson with Celine Calloway, a kind teacher. While they learned, two big dogs ran toward them. "Ragnar, Apollo," a man called. Isolde smiled. "Alistair Blake, you're still in Malibu?" The man nodded. "I'm looking for a home for these dogs." "Can we keep them?" the twins begged. Cassian smiled. "We did promise them a dog." And just like that, their new life had truly begun. Cassian reminded Elowin about something, and now they had two puppies named Ragnar and Apollo. Celine laughed. "Well, my lesson is almost over anyway. Same time tomorrow?" she asked as the swimming teacher left. Alistair stayed behind to help the boys teach their new puppies some basic tricks. Isolde watched them with a knowing smile. "Alistair is single, you know," she said to Elowin, "and he's great with kids." Elowin's eyes went wide. "Isolde, eh?" "Cassian and I." "Oh, I know, dear," Isolde said with a little smile. "I wasn't talking about you." She looked over at Celine, who was walking away. "I just think everyone deserves a chance to be happy." That night, the family sat on the beach, watching the sunset. The twins were snuggled up with their new puppies. Cassian felt happy. All the problems at work felt so far away compared to the joy of watching his sons enjoy their new life. "Daddy?" Ronan asked sleepily. "Is this our happy ending?" Cassian pulled his son close. "No, buddy," he said softly. "This is just our happy beginning." But life had other plans. As they walked back to the house, Cassian's phone buzzed. It was a message that changed everything. DNA test results may have been tampered with. Vaughn demands new tests. Court hearing scheduled. Cassian looked up at his family. Elowin was helping Soren pick up seashells. Ronan was running on the sand with Apollo. Isolde was pointing at the stars, teaching the boys their names. Cassian clenched his jaw. No one was going to take this happiness away from them. Not Vaughn. Not the courts. No one. The next morning started like any other. Elowin helped the twins get dressed for their first day at their new school. Ragnar and Apollo waited at the door. But then Evander Hale, Cassian's lawyer, arrived with bad news. "Vaughn's team found something," he said, placing papers on the kitchen table. "They claim the DNA test was faked." Cassian frowned. "That's impossible. I was there when the test was done." Evander looked uneasy. "They say someone at the lab took a bribe, and they think Elowin was behind it." "Ridiculous," Isolde stormed in. "I was there. Everything was done right." Elowin sat down, looking pale. "They're never going to leave us alone, are they?" Before anyone could answer, the twins came running down the stairs, excited about school. "Daddy, look! We match!" Ronan twirled in his blazer. "And I tied my tie all by myself." Soren grinned. His tie was crooked, but Cassian smiled anyway. He quickly put away the legal papers. "You both look very handsome, ready for your first day." As Elowin drove the boys to school, Cassian and Evander planned their next steps. Isolde paced the room, making calls. "We need to get ahead of this," Evander said. "Vaughn wants the kids sent back to New York while the new tests are done." Cassian's face darkened. "They're not objects to be moved around. They're my sons." "Of course they are," Isolde said. But we need to be smart. What about Judge Williams? She owes me a favor. Before they could make a plan, Elowen called. Her voice was shaky. Cassian, there are reporters outside the school. They're asking the boys about DNA tests. The principal had to call security. Cassian grabbed his car keys. I'm on my way. When he arrived, Elowen was trying to protect the twins from flashing cameras. Reporters shouted questions. Mr. Reynolds, did you fake the test? Mrs. Reynolds, did you pay someone to lie? Boys, do you want to stay with your father? Ronan was crying. Soren looked scared but held his brother's hand bravely. Suddenly, a strong voice cut through the noise. Enough! Alistair Blake pushed through the crowd. He was wearing his doctor's coat, and his voice was serious. These are children, not a news story. Back off, or I'll have you all arrested. The school security helped clear the way, and Cassian rushed his family inside. In the principal's office, Ronan curled up in Cassian's lap. Soren clung to Elowen. Maybe we should take them home, Elowen said softly. No, Cassian said firmly. We can't let Vaughn win. Alistair knelt beside the boys. Hey guys, remember what we learned with Ragnar and Apollo? Sometimes scary things happen, but we face them together. The boys sniffled and nodded. Tell you what, Alistair said. I'll walk you to class. I heard there's a rabbit named Snowball in your classroom. The boys perked up right away. As Alistair led them to class, Isolde arrived. I've called every news station, she said. They'll all be getting legal warnings. No one messes with my grandsons. That afternoon, Celine arrived for the boys' swimming lesson. I saw the news. Are they okay? The boys were already in the pool laughing. Children were stronger than adults gave them credit for. They're stronger than we think, Elowen said. They get that from their mother. Cassian hugged her. Isolde, watching, spoke up. I made some calls. Vaughn's daughter, Clara, the one he never talks about, she's willing to tell the truth. Cassian was surprised. What truth? That he uses his own children for business. He tried to force her to marry a business partner's son for a deal. Before they could talk more, excited shouts came from the pool. Daddy, look, I can swim without the float, Ronan called. Me too, Soren added. Alistair, watching, smiled. Children teach us how to move forward. That night, after the twins were asleep, the adults gathered to make a plan. Evander warned, Vaughn is desperate. He'll do anything to win. Let him try, Cassian said. But he crossed a line, messing with my children. Elowen touched his hand. We need to do what's best for them. As their doctor, Alistair said, I can tell the court they're happy here. And they're making progress in swimming, Celine added. That should count too. The next morning, Cassian found Ronan in his office, looking serious. Daddy, is that bad man trying to take us away? Cassian hugged him. Nobody is taking you away. You belong here with Mommy and me. Promise? Promise. Soren ran in. Daddy, the dogs found a crab on the beach. Cassian smiled. This was what mattered. No test could change that. Later, at an art show at the boys' school, Cassian got bad news. They want the boys in court next week, he told Elowen. They want to ask them who their real dad is. Then, worse news. A headline on Alistair's tablet, Vaughn's daughter changes her story, now supports her father. Isolde narrowed her eyes. He bought her off. Before they could react, the school doors opened. Leander Vaughn himself walked in. Cassian stepped forward, but Elowen beat him to it. Get out, she hissed. You have no right to be here, Elowen said angrily. Vaughn just smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. Oh, but I do, he said. As an important member of Reynolds Enterprises, I have every right to see where the future heirs are being raised. The twins, Ronan and Soren, felt the bad energy in the room. They moved closer to their parents. Vaughn looked at them carefully, studying their faces. They look so much like Cassian, he said. Almost too much. It makes me wonder if the DNA test was real. That's enough. Dr. Alistair stepped forward. He was usually kind, but now he was serious. I am the children's doctor, and you are making them upset. Leave now, or I will call the police. Vaughn held up his hands like he was innocent. No need for that. I just wanted to see for myself. He looked straight at Cassian. Next week's board meeting will be interesting, especially when I share my proof about the DNA test. After he left, Elena quickly made phone calls. Cassian and Eloin tried to focus on the art exhibition, but they were worried. The twins could feel something was wrong. Why was that man looking at us like that? Ronan whispered to Soren. Maybe he's jealous because our paintings are better than his, Soren whispered back. Ronan giggled. That night, when the twins were asleep, the family sat together in the living room. Dr. Alistair, Celine, and Evander Hale had come over after hearing about Vaughn's visit. He's planning something big, Evander said. I heard he has been meeting secretly with board members, showing them some papers. Could he have real proof that the DNA test was fake? Eloin asked, her voice small. It doesn't matter, Cassian said firmly. Those are my sons. I don't need a test to tell me that. Elena suddenly stood up. I think it's time I go to New York. Everyone looked at her in surprise. Serafina Vaughn and I used to be close, she explained. She spent summers with us when she was young. Maybe she needs someone to remind her what's really important, her family. Alistair nodded. I know people at the testing lab. I can find out if Vaughn is telling the truth. Celine smiled at him. Their relationship had grown stronger because they both cared so much about the Reynolds family. I'm coming with you, Mother, Cassian said. Eloin looked worried. But I'll be back before the boys' school play, Cassian promised. I told them I'd be there, and I always keep my promises. That night, as they lay in bed, Eloin curled up next to Cassian. I'm scared, she whispered. Not about the money. I'm scared of losing us. Cassian held her close. 5 years ago, I lost you because I was too busy with work. I won't make that mistake again. Vaughn can take the company if he wants, but he can't take what really matters. The boys need a normal life, Eloin said. All this fighting, the court, the news, it's not fair to them. You're right, Cassian said. That's why I've made a decision. If Vaughn wants the company so badly, maybe we should let him have it. Eloin sat up. What? I've been talking to Dorian Finch. He wants to start a new business focused on helping the environment. I could work from home and spend more time with the family. But Reynolds Enterprises is your legacy. Cassian smiled. No, our boys are my legacy. The company is just a business. The next morning, Cassian packed for New York. The twins tried to help by putting their stuffed animals in his suitcase. To keep you company, Daddy, they said. When will you be back? Ronan asked, his lip trembling. Very soon, Cassian promised. Just in time to see you in the play. I'm not a tree anymore, Ronan giggled. Miss Calloway said I can be a superhero. Even better. Cassian scooped both boys into a hug. He closed his eyes and listened to their laughter. On the private jet, Elena made plans. Serafina will listen to reason. She just needs to remember who she really is. Cassian nodded, but his mind was on Eloin and the boys. In New York, the boardroom felt cold. Vaughn passed out papers. These documents prove the DNA test was fake, he said. Someone paid the lab to change the results, and I think we all know who did it. Before Cassian could speak, the doors burst open. Serafina Vaughn stood there, looking nervous but strong. Alistair was beside her. That's a lie, Serafina said loudly, and I won't help you anymore. Vaughn's face turned dark. Serafina, remember our deal? If you don't help me, I'll ruin Evander's career. Serafina's voice shook. I remember. Just like I remember when you tried to force me to marry someone for business. You haven't changed. Alistair stepped forward. I spoke to the testing lab. The woman Vaughn says was bribed has been on maternity leave since before the test. She wasn't even there. Elena smiled. Did you really think we wouldn't check? But Vaughn wasn't done. Then explain this. He held up a paper. Elowen went to another lab 2 weeks before the test. Cassian looked at Alistair, who nodded. Yes, Elowen got another test. She wanted to be completely sure before the official one. She was protecting the boys. Meanwhile, in Malibu, Elowen was helping the twins get ready for their play. But her heart was worried. She hadn't heard from Cassian. Celine arrived with a surprise visitor, Mrs. Winslow from Brooklyn. Mrs. Winslow, the twins shouted, hugging her. I couldn't miss my favorite superheroes in their big play. She laughed. Elowen checked her phone. Still no message from Cassian. He'll be here, Celine said softly. He never breaks a promise. Back in New York, the boardroom was in chaos. Vaughn was shouting. Serafina was revealing all the bad things he had done. Enough, Cassian said loudly. This ends now. He looked at the board. Yes, I chose my family over this company, and I'd do it again. He placed some papers on the table. Here's what Vaughn doesn't want you to see. Our new projects are making more money than ever. Our employees are happier. But more importantly, I found something better than all of this. I found love. I found my sons. He turned to Vaughn. You can have the company, but you must agree to 3 things. 1, you never question my children's DNA again. 2, you apologize to Elowen and the boys. 3, you make things right with Serafina. Vaughn's face turned red. You're giving up everything? No, Cassian smiled. I'm keeping everything that matters. Just then, his phone buzzed. A message from Elowen. The play starts in an hour. The boys keep asking for their daddy. Mother, handle the paperwork. I have a promise to keep. His jet flew back to California as fast as possible. When he ran into the school, Elowen was pacing. You made it, she cried. Wild horses couldn't keep me away. Ronan peeked out in his superhero costume. Daddy! Soren appeared too. You came. Cassian knelt down, fixing their capes. Of course I did. I promised. That night, as he watched his boys on stage, he knew he had made the right choice. Family was all that mattered. Cassian knelt down and fixed Soren's cape and Ronan's superhero mask. Of course, I came. I promised, didn't I? In Cassian's opinion, this was the best play ever. Ronan saved the day with his superhero powers, and Soren, his trusted sidekick, helped defeat the bad vegetables who didn't want kids to eat dessert. The audience cheered loudly. Their new California family was there. Celine and Alistair holding hands, Mrs. Winslow wiping happy tears, Isolde smiling proudly, and even Dorian Finch had flown in to watch. After the play, the twins ran around excitedly, telling everyone about it. Cassian pulled Elowen aside. There's something I want to ask you, he said, reaching into his pocket. 5 years ago, I lost you because I forgot what really mattered. I won't make that mistake again. He knelt down and held out a ring. Elowen Thompson, will you marry me again? The twins saw what was happening and ran over. Say yes, Mommy! Ronan bounced up and down. We can be ring bearers, Soren added. Elowen looked at the man she loved, their 2 wonderful sons, and all the people who had become their family. Yes, she whispered. Yes to everything. Cassian slipped the ring on her finger. Isolde wiped away tears while Mrs. Winslow sobbed loudly. Celine leaned against Alistair, who was already offering to help plan their beach wedding. The twins hugged their parents, making a perfect family circle. Their dogs, Ragnar and Apollo, who had been waiting in Isolde's car, ran to join the celebration, their tails wagging happily. Are you sad about the company, Daddy? Ronan asked, looking at Cassian carefully. Cassian picked up his son while Soren climbed into his other arm. How could I be sad? Cassian said. I have everything I could ever want right here. Elowen reached up and wiped a smudge of superhero paint from Ronan's cheek. What happens now? She asked. Cassian looked at his family, the one he had lost and found again, the one that had become even stronger through all their struggles. Now, he said, We live happily ever after. But life was never that simple. Even as they celebrated, Vaughn was making one last desperate move to try and stop their happiness. The Malibu beach was covered in white flowers and twinkling lights. In just 3 months, Cassian and Elowen had planned the perfect sunset wedding. The twins practiced their ring-bearer duties with Ragnar and Apollo trotting beside them. But just 2 days before the wedding, bad news arrived. Vaughn has filed an emergency request, Evander Hale, their lawyer, said. He's saying Cassian can't take over the company until the paternity issue is solved. Cassian sighed as he helped Soren with his bow tie. He already signed the agreement. It's over. He's saying he was forced to sign, Evander explained. Isolde stormed into the room, her face red with anger. That snake, after everything we found out about him, where is Claire? Claire, Elowen asked, worried about the young woman who had helped them. She's safe, Alistair assured them. Celine and I made sure she's staying at my sister's ranch in Montana. The twins, sensing the tension, huddled close to their parents. Is the bad man trying to hurt us again? Ronan asked in a small voice. Cassian hugged both boys tightly. No one can hurt us, buddy. We're stronger together. Remember that. That evening, as the family sat on the beach watching the sunset, Isolde spoke up. Vaughn's problem isn't really about the company or the test. It's about something bigger. Elowen frowned. What do you mean? He's alone. Isolde explained. His own daughter won't talk to him. He has no grandchildren, no love, no family. He's watching Cassian choose family over money, and it's making him jealous. Cassian thought about this. So what are you suggesting? Isolde smiled. I think it's time we show him what he's really fighting against. The next morning, Vaughn walked into his office and stopped in shock. His waiting room was full of familiar faces. Claire was there. So was his ex-wife, Vesper. But most surprising of all was his brother, Lucian, whom he hadn't spoken to in 20 years. What is this? Vaughn demanded. An intervention, Claire said softly, because someone reminded us that family is worth fighting for. Isolde stepped forward. Hello, Leander. Remember when our children were young? How you and Lucian would bring Claire to play with Cassian? Those summer barbecues at the Hamptons? Vaughn's cold expression faltered. That was a long time ago. It doesn't have to be just memories, Isolde said gently. Look at what you've lost by holding on to anger. Your daughter, your brother, your chance to know your grandchildren. You're trying to destroy Cassian's happiness, but maybe you should try to find your own. Back in Malibu, wedding preparations were in full swing. Celine helped Elowen with her dress while Alistair told the twins funny stories about their dad's childhood. And then your daddy jumped into the pool with all his clothes on. Alistair laughed. The boys giggled. Is Aunt Claire coming to the wedding? Ronan asked. We hope so, Cassian said, walking in with his phone. And I just got some good news. Vaughn has withdrawn his complaint. More than that, Vaughn had apologized publicly and announced his retirement. Claire would now take over his shares and work with Cassian's new company. Sometimes, Cassian told his sons, people just need to be reminded of what really matters. The wedding day was perfect. The beach was filled with their family, blood relatives, and those who had become family. To everyone's surprise, Vaughn showed up too, standing quietly in the back with his brother. When the twins spotted Claire, they ran to hug her. Isolde smiled, remembering how she had once fought against Cassian and Elowen's love. Now, she couldn't imagine their family any other way. As the sun set, Ronan and Soren walked down the aisle, Ragnar and Apollo following proudly. Elowen appeared, glowing in her simple white dress. Dearly beloved, the minister started, but Soren interrupted loudly. That's our mommy and daddy. Everyone laughed. Cassian and Elowen's vows were simple but full of love. The twins added their own. I promise to clean my room, Ronan said. Most days, Soren added, making everyone chuckle. When they kissed, the twins cheered, and the dogs barked happily. That night, as they danced on the beach, Cassian held his family close. "Are you happy, Daddy?" Ronan asked sleepily. Cassian looked at his sons, his beautiful wife, and all the people who loved them. "I've never been happier, buddy." And with that, they knew. They were finally home. Thanks for watching. If you liked the story, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Check out our other videos too. See you in the next one.